Hello, everyone. Hi, Chester. Hello. Um, Agnes, is that Agnes from Law of Attraction Coach? I'm not completely sure. Laila and Emily, hello. Good evening. This will be a very interesting webinar, or at least I hope it is. Um, as I'm going to use this following time to elaborate a little bit more upon my plans, what Aim to Be You actually includes, what kind of growth orientation that it gives you, and some very practical steps on how to get started with it itself. Um, we are going to be I don't have a presentation for today, so it will be a little bit more free flowing with asking questions, like raising your hand and discussing all of this stuff. Because Aim to Be You, for those who don't know it just yet, is a productivity framework, and that lets you externalize your thoughts and your ideas and your action, your intellect itself, into an external system, so you can be the observer of those things. And that's a very interesting way of thinking, because like Sadhguru mentioned, you're not your mind and you're not even your body. And the trick thing is, what I noticed. Yeah, no worries. Thank you. The trick thing is, what I noticed is my personal growth has gone very, very rapidly comparison to where I was, comparison to how I am now. Like I really feel comfortable, competent on uh, me showing me to the world. Yeah, found my eye. Thank you. Um, and I believe that this framework, this Aim to Be You productivity framework, is giving people practical steps on actually escape that feeling of busyness and escape that feeling of overwhelm and all of the noise that we have inside of us internally. And that is something that I want to address together with you today. Um, for those who already know me a little bit, I am a very big advocate for something that I call the Braindump, which is an external system where you dump all of your ideas, all your visions, all of your stuff. And within this workshop, I want to invite you all to create a brain dump if you haven't just yet. Kind of interactive, like who has already has a brain dump in a structured way. Or maybe it's good to tell you guys what a brain dump is. A brain dump is a central spot, like digitally or physically, where you gather all of your input into one central hub. Like it's a temporary placeholder where stuff actually comes in. So the same goes with like grabbing something, capturing something. Like you first need to capture it with your hand, and then you're going to organize it. But the capturing itself is the hand itself. So the question is like, feel free to raise your digital hands. Who already has a brain dump and maybe actively using it? Jason, like you have it, but you don't actively using it. Is that the?
So no, I just do it a little bit different. I don't have one centralized one, so I've done it via journaling,
Mm-hmm.
both digitally and I guess in the past on paper. Uh, but I don't have it centralized to continue to pull from. Like it'll be a brain dump for today, and then
Yeah,
let that pass.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the tricky thing is like the idea is to build a system that you can fully trust all of the time. And like having that one central space, like, okay, this is the brain dump and it will get processed towards something. But really using it as a one central spot. So that's an important one. Because let's imagine that you write it down into your diary, like you write down 20 of those brain dump ideas. And then you go to the following day and you're kind of forgetting about it. Like it's there, but you're kind of you just lost it. Like even if it was an important idea, an important project, an important reference somewhere, you kind of forgot it. And 1 week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, we're like, okay, in which brain dump was this actually added upon? So the idea is to externalize it somewhere, digitally or physically. You can actually like buy one book, this is the brain dump that you're having. And then the idea is to process that into something else. And then you can remove that from your diary or from your brain dump. Because the idea is your brain dump is your how's that called in computer language? Your CPU, like your actual like workspace. And this is the stuff that you can hold inside of your mind actively, but you need to like capture it first, see what you want to do with it, and then organize it, and then put it somewhere else. This is one of the key factors within personal management system. If you guys are interested in building that personal management system, like the capture is the first thing. Like I had like one-on-one client. He was a like great salesman, and he mentioned like after using the capture method, only just 1 week, maybe 2 weeks that he did it. He mentioned that he was sleeping more tightly and more secure. He was not waking up anymore out of stress. Like I still need to like reach out to that client or get back to that client because he promised him something. And that's within the idea of we are not our mind, but we are the observer of our thoughts, our ideas, our actions, our intellect. And the idea here is to externalize your intellect and free yourself up from that concept. So it's a spiritual journey in a certain way, or at least it was for me. Oh, Jason, are you able to mute Chester? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, that's the first step, and then the next step is to what to.
Yeah, maybe you're going to explain it next. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. What's your question?
So you had mentioned that this first point is capturing it, but then you are processing it out of there. So everything doesn't stay in the brain dump. The actual intent is to move it to some other location. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like the brain dump is really a temporary thing. And in the ideal situation, like even I don't have it, but in the ideal situation, you want to like finish your day off completely and like closing off all of your brain dump ideas and actions and that everything is processed. That doesn't mean that you actually needed to have that done, but you need to place that piece of information or that piece of action into somewhere into your system that you can fully trust it and that it will get done. And that's a very important one. So it could be, I don't know, the 5 names that you've come across in a meeting or the notes that you've written out in a meeting, to actually have that in your digital calendar and to have a note as in, this was the conversation that we had. These were all of the people that were added upon that one. So that's the ideal state. And then you can remove it from your brain dump.
Yeah. And then another question, how often do you do a brain dump? Every day?
It's a continuous practice. So it's not that I like ended off my day with a brain dump, but I just now, like I had an interesting conversation with Fabi and then the guy itself, I forgot his name at the moment. I'm like, I want to reach out to that guy because I feel like, ooh, that's a great connection that I could actually have with him. So what I do is like I write down his name or my intention of wanting to connect with him into my brain dump. So it's currently in my brain dump itself. And me processing that brain dump will make sure that it's going to be placed in my to-do list, which we will be diving into later on, like we discussed it a little bit already with action management. So then it gets removed, like deleted from the brain dump itself, and then into my action management system. If I can actually do the task directly without putting it in there, like I'll just do it directly. I'll just send the text, find him, like that's possible as well. But quite often, a lot of the The actions is like 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. And then you need a system that you're like, okay, I really trust this all of the time. So that's the processing, if that makes sense, Jason.
Yes, yeah, and I don't know if it's helpful for anybody else. The way that I've heard brained up in the past, or the way that I've practiced it in the past, is to really just get everything out of your mind down onto paper or down onto something. But though it does sound a little bit more like the way that you're referring to it, it could be used throughout the day even. It's almost that bin of, okay, this needs to be processed, so let me put it into the brain dump where I can process it later at the given time.
Yes.
Okay.
Like a brain dump itself is very, very messy. Um, um, quite often because it's like super randomly you're walking in the park and you're like, ah, this is an amazing idea. And then you can like dump that specific idea into your brain dump. So you can rewatch it, re-listen to it, like review it later on. But that is different comparison to making a review or a feedback upon your day, like a diary entrance. It's like it's a little bit of different energy. It's like a diary entrance. It's like, okay, what did I do today? First that and that and that and that and that. And you could integrate that into your brain dump as well. But it's the brain dump itself is capturing the information, all of the data that you are receiving. Because many of us are living as if we are the data, as if we are the thing that we think about. But we're not. We're an observer of that thing. And for me, like that, like let's imagine that you like go into your job and you're like full in control over whatever happens. Like every task, every action, every agenda point, you're like just taken care of all of the time. Like the level of peace that it will give you, the level of like what I experienced in the past is that I heard so many things, like all of the actions that I need to do and all of the projects and all of the ideas, but I wasn't like I was trying to remember them. And it's kind of confronting if people had said something already maybe 3 times, and then you're forgetting about that particular thing because you don't understand it just yet, or your mind is not actually there. And then capturing that data and then processing it will give you access to it. Um, so my invitation, very practically as well, is to craft yourself a brain dump in your phone. Nowadays, you can send messages towards yourself in WhatsApp. And like the really invitation is start doing that. Like this will improve the level of quality upon your life beyond belief. And that's something that I really want to lean into because all of us have the tendency to want to talk to other people, to reflect upon our own behavior. But talking to other people quite often results in either telling what we've done in the world or complaining that's what we have done or like sharing the experience itself. Doesn't need to be complaining, but I see a lot of people do the complaining part. And what if you can like want to have that mirror in front of you without actually someone else present? Like you can actually mirror yourself so much more pure. Like actually mention like I was really annoyed by this person. Like I was really annoyed. And like share that and express your feelings around that. Because that will free yourself up into your emotional layer. And sometimes you feel like is that a good example? Yeah, it is pretty extreme, but sometimes when I'm thinking about something like really, really emotionally heavy, then I go into that emotion by myself, even though very slightly, but I give myself the space to express that. And I'm expressing that not towards another person, but towards my own system, because then I can be more pure upon myself. And it's a crystal clear mirror. So like, create a WhatsApp group for that, for yourself. So pin that up all the way up. and actually have that there. And like the extra benefit on WhatsApp is you see the time frame, like the time stamp. So you see like, yes, no, Saturday, I was out until like 4 a.m. And like the last entry that I did was Edward, so that a guy's name. I'm like, who did I actually spoke with that I wanted to remember his name at 4 a.m.? I'm like, holy smokes, who was that? Who was that? And I'm like, I'm going back into my journey into like going out, and I'm like, yeah, that was that guy. That was great. And then I remember that story about, oh yeah, that was the storyline, and that was why I wanted to capture his name. And then and I enter his name into my system, and I write down the story as in this was the reason why I wanted to connect with him. Like it's a great guy, great feeling, great energy. He was working on something beautiful. Like it could be so many things, but um, there is a concept which is the memory palace, that you have an internal image upon like your house. You kind of know where your bed is. Like you know in which space it is because you have a mental image of it. Like we think in images, in stories, in maps. And the same goes with, yeah, a name like that. Okay, what did I do in that moment? Like you kind of have a map, an internal map. But sometimes you need a hook, like a hook to remember something on, and then you can like get that knowledge back. And the more and more that you are going to lean into this concept, the more and more that you can extend the level of your thinking. Like, oh yeah, today I had a conversation with that person and with that person and with Alex, and Alex was like the woman that was serving me coffee a couple of hours ago. Oh yeah, and Alex was a really great person, and she's there all of the time. And like um, you can increase the level of your thinking like that. It's literally an extension upon your own intellect. Um, Jason, how does that kind of land for you?
We've shared a lot of key components to this. One is using it as a mirror to reflect back. So not just a brain dump, but now you're taking it like a step further with that mirror to reflect back. I think that's very powerful as well. So being able to utilize it for both aspects, though, that brain dump, so that yes, when you've met a person, you could just put it in there, like you had shared, maybe putting somebody's name and what the context was in regards to the conversation you had, why you would want to remember them. But also then voicing things that are coming up for you as well. And you could do that. I guess you could do that all in one voice note, is to mention the person's name, why it was so impactful, and then also any emotions or anything to look deeper in as well. I think that's very powerful, and WhatsApp is a great app to use for that. Then you had mentioned how we do think in images, and we also store memories in images. So utilizing the hook idea, what would be the hook? Is it the time frame you had talked about, kind of going back to when you had met that person? Would that be the hook, or how could you describe the hook?
Um, like the hook itself is a concept of like this is a method on how I remember the situation.
Mhm.
And in this case, for me, it was like only his name wouldn't be enough. Like if I actually like wrote it down on a piece of paper, I'm like, Edward, Edward. Where did I see an Edward? I don't know. Like imagine if I was processing something for like the past week, like oh through my notes, like who is Edward? I've got no idea. And in this case, the useful thing for the uh, WhatsApp message itself is the time frame as well. Like oh yeah, Saturday 4 a.m. Yeah, what did I do Saturday? Oh yeah, I went out because I have that on my calendar. And oh, great. Then I can place that into the situation and I can relive the situation. So the goal is to relive the situation in such a way that you find more clarity upon the experiences that you had in the past. So that could be like only his name. Like I send a voice message to you, Jason, yesterday or the day before that, like that 7 minutes, pretty powerful idea and all of that stuff. And I've copied that one into my Braindump. I'm like, this is something that I need to process. There were so many ideas and insights and all of that stuff. So when I copy that into my Braindump, I'm going to like re-listen it, like write it down, and then like process that data into my system. This was the idea. I need to reach out to that person. I need to reach out to that one. Like based on this message, I reached out to 20 people today, like, an hour ago. Like, hey, are you interested? I'm doing this thing. Are you interested? Like I've already got 6 yeses. Like, and and of course this is pretty like on the verge on what I'm currently doing. But what I noticed is that it gave me confidence with walking into a room and like being knowledgeable about like, yeah, I know everyone's names because I just like process that data. Like I know who I'm going to meet. I know what I spoke with that person about. And like for me, a year ago I worked for a pretty big company. So it was approximately in that specific location, I think we were what 400 people. So I spoke with, I don't know, 15 new people every week. And imagine that, like, you know the names of all of those 14 people and all of the information that you spoke about with those 14 people. And every time that you are seeing into the future and you're like, hey, I've got another meeting with that person, then you can go through your notes, like, okay, give me all of the notes from that person. You just have it available. And it makes you so powerful because people like barely remember stuff. Like we're not here to remember the ideas or things. We're here to create a new reality around us for the future. Like remembering is limiting us from true expansion. And yeah, by externalizing that idea somewhere, you can you can truly grow as an individual as a result. Like it's unbelievable how much yeah, like I feel like I have mind value very highly on top of my value scale, but on the intellectual, no, not intellectual, in the development of spirituality. Let me say it like that. Um, and I feel very comfortable with me being me in front of them. Like I don't feel intimidated by, oh, this is a high level individual anymore. Because I feel like that I am that person now. Because I've like the the idea for me personally is the spiritual journey is to become conscious of your own subconscious. And if you're showing some patterns or you're having such a random beautiful idea or sometimes like a very annoyed situation, like I'm really triggered by this situation, great. Write it down and later on process it and ask yourself, what makes you feel annoyed by this situation? And then you can start being the observer of your own patterns. And then you become aware of your own subconscious. And all this sounds very big on that little concept of the brain dump. And I do want to like emphasize upon the brain dump itself because that's the starting point of everything. And later on, we can go into like action management and information management and the diary and the. But the true starting point first, even in this conversation, is the brain dump itself. And there is even an extra layer. This is something from Jim Quick. Write 2 columns, or at least no, let me say, like write 2 titles at the top. One of them is capture, and the other one in the other column is create. And draw a big line in the middle of the page. We are either capturing information or we are creating a new idea, like how would this idea help me personally? You're creating a new concept, an idea, and vision. And if you, like on that left column, and only capture the ideas that I'm currently giving without creating a new idea. And if you want to create a new idea, like, oh, this would be a great idea for a friend of mine, like write that into your create column. Or this would be beneficial for, I don't know, the course that I'm giving, and all of the 20 people like complain about information overwhelm. Like, hey, could I like send Tim an offer or send Tim an idea that he can train my 12 or my 20 coaches? Yeah, coaches or like course members. Because then you are creating a new idea based on what you've captured from my knowledge. And those two separate will already clarify your thinking. Because quite often when we write notes, we combine that into like one page. I'm also capturing, and I'm also like I'm watering down the idea because my own inputs embedded into that one. Like you don't need to agree with me, but you need to like capture the information that I'm saying with this course. If you're interested in what I'm saying, like you don't have to be, but like be very mindful upon like only capture information from a webinar, from a presentation, from reading a book. Like what's actually being said is different compared to what can I do with it as a result. So those are the two concepts.
Right. And you would be, I don't want to say capture because we're breaking it into capture create, but you would be recording both of those possibly during a simultaneous event. Like, so let's say somebody was listening to you right now and they were capturing and putting it in the capture column of what you were saying, but there were also then thoughts, ideas of what they would want to create from it, how they would want to maybe bring that into their life. And then they would write that down in the create column.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
And the funny thing is, because like we talked about the hooks already a little bit, like let's imagine that within this one course you have like that left column and I'm like giving amazing information and you're like, oh, let me write that down, and this is a great idea, and this is a great idea, and this is a great idea. You're just like overwhelmed by the amazing information. Sometimes I listen to a podcast and I'm like, holy smokes, this is powerful. Like you don't even have time to create new ideas, but you know there are some like key factors in that podcast or something. Then after the webinar itself or after the presentation, you're just going to reread your own notes and you're like, okay, what made me write this down? What made me resonate? What do I want to create as based on this capture? And then you're going to write it down beside it, as in create. Like this was a great idea. I want to integrate that for my webinar, for my own one. And then you're creating hooks, and then you're reliving that presentation that you have. Like the idea itself is to relive multiple versions of the thing that you've consumed. Like this is actually the starting point of time bending. Or time bending, or multiple realities, or multiple forms. Because your mind is so much more powerful than we have been taught by the educational system. Like the mind of everyone is so massively amazing, and it pains me when people say like, I'm not that smart. Like, oh, guys, like your brain is such a magnificent like organism, but we need to like enhance the skills upon that. And I believe that Braindump is one of the starting points to almost prove to yourself that you're capable with this amount of thinking. Well, I do not hear you, Jason.
So you definitely have me intrigued in regards to the idea of reliving the event be being either the opening or part of the time bending. So can you go into that more deeply?
Um, yeah, let's imagine. Sometimes I'm having an idea, and I'm sure that you can recognize that as well. Like sometimes you're thinking about a certain situation, and then you're searching for the correct word, which represents the thing that you want to say. Like in that moment, you have an internal image inside of your brain saying like, do I want to say this or that or that? Like there are a couple of scenarios, and you're searching for the correct word, which like resonates with that scenario. And in that little speed, in that 5 seconds, 1 second, 10 seconds, you're thinking about so many variables, and then you're reliving so much information in that short amount of time. And then the only challenge that we have is to like match the words that we say, like to actually get it out there to the outside world that matches your internal world. And when you are um, like recording this and then you're re-watching your own episode, then at the moment when you're re-watching your own content, then you're like, at that moment I thought about that and that storyline. Oh, didn't really speak about it, but you remembered it because this was a hook. Like, that's what a great idea. And now I can do that and that and that. So you can create multiple depths of thinking. If that makes
So how many times, if you can go multiple depths, does it then translate that it is better to go over the event multiple times, and how many times?
it really depends. Um, like I, of course, now we did a couple of the webinars. For example, I'm really going to rewatch this one because there are some like nuggets in there for me as well. Like I noticed that already. But the aim to be you concept or the digital footprint, like I listened to that one 2 or 3 or 4 times maybe because I feel like, oh yeah, because now I missed making myself clear in a certain way, and I was really good with organizing this particular thing. And when you're receiving that feedback upon your own recording, then you can optimize that for the next time that you're going to explain that to a group. And like a lot of us have never actually been listened to. Like it's so terrible to see. Like a lot of the coaching itself is to actually listen to the other individual. Because almost no one has ever experienced that. And listening to someone or having a conversation with someone clarifies the thinking of that person. And this system, this digital system, this externalizing that system is skipping the person itself, like the coach, and you're directly interacting with yourself. And that's a level that's beyond what I've ever seen with others. And like, Jason, you know me now already a little bit, and I can assume that you're also like seeing improvements upon like how I am as an individual. And it's going pretty rapidly because I feel like that I have that live feedback constantly. And like we don't really have a lot of feedback in our life. And this gives us the feedback.
Yeah, and when you talk about feedback, it's probably useful to also talk about how to best utilize that feedback, because there are some people that are very adverse to feedback, getting feedback because of past experience or the way that they process it. So how have you been able to take that feedback, or actually both ways? How do you share this and not judge it? That would be one question. And how then do you create useful feedback for yourself to then improve upon or learn from? So not judging it, how do you work through that? And then how do you actually create the feedback to improve upon?
Well, let's imagine that you send a voice message to yourself, like, I don't know, complaining about something, or you being very happy, or you being like something, and then you're re-listening to that voice recording itself. And when you're cringing on listening to your own voice message, like you're judging your own stuff, like re-listening to your own voice message is really like one of the starting points here as well. Like it's maybe even sooner than the Braindump itself. That's a very important one. But if you are, while you're listening it, if you're cringing upon listening to yourself, then it gives you the space to, okay, why am I cringing? Like, is my voice not the way that I wanted it to be? Is my English vocabulary not properly enough? Am I using words that doesn't really reflect upon that? And like your competence doesn't reflect your value as an individual. And that's way different comparison to how we've been taught because we need to perform well, and the better that you perform, the more worth that you are. Like it's totally BS. Um, but like having that reflection and noticing myself, or if you notice yourself cringing, like, okay, why am I cringing? Like, what did I want to improve upon this message that I want to do differently? So you have a difference between like reality and expectation, like your personal expectation. And because you are the one that observes those two, like it's easier to actually get that towards each other. Because you're like, okay, let me just focus on vocabulary of the R instead of the ach. Like which thing? Um, okay, really focus only on that and forget about all of the rest. Because I feel like that's something that I could currently practice and improve upon. But if someone else gives you the feedback, then they judge you based on what they perceive that's best for you. And then like you add another complex layer. Like even though someone is very good with feedback, but giving the feedback, like I give feedback, I think that I give pretty good feedback. Most people, like I've learned that being that doing that better and better. And I still judge them based on like what I see with my competence and my reality. And they might be in that state like, oh, I'm happy that I did a coaching with someone and like actually helped her. And like, that's really great. Like, they're not in that level of like, think about the words that you're using and the ums and ahs and like, they're not yet in that state. But when I'm giving that feedback, even though it's good feedback, like, they're like, no, but this is already a massive victory. Like, let me enjoy that massive victory. And that's the difference between your expectation and your reality. So you're in control over that difference. I hope that answers it.
How do you keep from falling into a loop within yourself? So if you're the only one giving yourself feedback, how do you keep from just looping as opposed to growing?
Um, well, you always have blind spots. And there are stuff, like I personally, like sometimes I re-listen to myself and I'm like, oh, that was annoying. Like somewhere that feeling kind of comes in. Or I could improve upon that one, or like, but there are stuff that's like looping itself is having a blind spot and not improve upon that behavior. Like I noticed that my English, not vocabulary is pretty well, but my grammar itself is not amazing. Like great, but I find it very difficult to improve upon that one. So what I actively do, like I read more, I like process it. But if you, Jason, would like give me the feedback upon like, Tim, like really work on your English skills because like your sentences aren't really grammatically correct. I'm like, thank you, Jason, but how? Like I've got no idea where to start. And because it's your blind spot, or because you like don't know what you can do to improve upon that one, you choose a layer that you can actually improve upon, and then improve upon that one, and then grow, and then choose upon one, and then grow. And like you keep doing that because like the goal itself is growth.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Let's talk about the idea of the blind spot. If there is a blind spot, and by definition, we are unaware of it. We're blind to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're the main one giving ourselves feedback and we're unaware of these blind spots, does it require us to also invite other people in to give feedback around areas that we might be unaware of? Or how do you see best to, um, I guess, open our eyes to our blind spots?
Yeah, that's the funny thing, as in like the growth is in the contrast. Like sometimes like also with you, Jason, like I'm like asking for feedback. Like what is not going well just now? Like what can I improve? What do you see? Like I actively ask for that. Like I don't need approval. I don't need like, hey, you're doing well. No, like okay, I've articulated my vision. I believe that I've done that pretty well. Like what do you currently see that is benefiting me from achieving that goal? Like I actively ask that to people. And with that feedback, like recently, this was quite a funny piece of feedback as well. And like I've written it down. And I of course I got that like aim and I to EQ concept. And they were like, oh, those terms like really sounds like businessy and like American made and like, oh, the big dream. I'm like, oh, that's interesting that you perceive that, like the term itself is pushing them away from actually saying yes. Like, oh, that's interesting. So would mindful productivity work better with you as a result? Yeah, that makes more sense. Oh, great. Because then, like, there's a whole new layer that I haven't seen, uh, me personally, because it really helps me. I'm like, oh, aim and this is what it includes. But if someone is being pushed back to that result, I can reframe it into that subgroup to actually reach them with the same value. And yeah, that will improve upon your blind spots.
So how do we dance between getting the feedback that's necessary for our growth? And I guess in regards to business, it's a little bit easier. Like we want the feedback from the customer because we need to know what might be pushing them away. Like by the sounds of it, that was some of the feedback that you received was it's not so much about you, but it's more about their experience, which was one of the concerns when we get feedback from others is that it's through their lens. So obviously in business, we need it. We need to hear from our customers because that's who we're trying to help. But in regards to our development, how might we dance uh, and play around getting the feedback that's necessary for our blind spots, but also
Yeah.
realizing that that might just be their point of view and from their lens.
Like for me, like the business and life is kind of the similar thing. Like in life or improvement, I want to like add value upon my own life and the value upon other people's lives. So for me, it's kind of the same thing. And I want to like emphasize a little bit upon like it's not the customer that you need to pay attention to, but sometimes it's like me that I'm already like nodding yes, like that's the thing. Is that then me nodding yes from, yeah, I've listened, I've heard enough, like I understand your point, like let me answer it. It could be that it's that part, or is it that way of, yes, you're hitting the nail on the head. Like the feedback comes if you're looking into the reaction of people that you speak with or to. And then you really start paying attention, like, because now, of course, like almost no one is done, of course, on camera, but like I really look to your face, Jason. Like, do you understand? Is it nodding? Is it this? Are you driving off? And if I'm not having that, I'm just talking into blindness. Like the live reflection is important. So like did still believe that there's something deeper there. Yeah, but like the reflection is upon how other people perceive you. I think that's a common story.
And is that more helpful in our development, or can that also be detrimental to our development?
To look at the reaction of others.
Mhm.
Um, well, it's kind of twofold. Kind of depends on like what kind of reaction that you're searching for. Like I'm personally like I'm not seeking for validation, but I'm seeking for do you understand what I've just said?
Mhm.
And if I'm searching for do you understand what I've just said, then it's actually helping my self-development. If I'm saying stuff to get your approval, to get your yes, to get your nodding, then it's detrimental. Because then I'm playing towards being the puppet that you desire me to be.
Yeah.
And it's getting away of that one. It's like true expression and like, do you understand the level that I'm coming from? And if you're like, Tim, like this really doesn't make sense. Like, why are you talking about? Okay, let's back it off just a little bit. Like find that resonance that you have with your counterpart and then leaning into that one. And then it's beneficial for your personal growth, for your business, for your own understanding, emotional being, everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very powerful distinction to be able to separate those, because when people just lump all feedback together and don't have either a way to gauge it or intention behind what they're looking for feedback about, I think that oftentimes we can very quickly get tied into then designing ourselves around that person, whatever the feedback is that they gave of what they like through their lens, as opposed to you're looking at, developing skills. So you want to be able to communicate, and you really do need feedback to hear, to get back to, okay, did I enunciate? Did I get this across clearly? Was it helpful for me to use less words, more words in describing it? All of those things, that's very important just in regards to the skill of communicating, or maybe a skill that you're working on in order to improve that development. um,
Yeah.
but keeping it separate from your your identity perhaps, or your sense of your authenticity, that would be, one of my concerns would be, okay, if I'm just gauging off the feedback of others, do I then lose some of my authenticity? But if we separate it towards those things that we are developing, whether they're skills, I don't know if we could branch it out quite or categorize it quite that way. Um, but keeping those two things separate, I think, is a very important distinction.
Yeah. And but this is also some of us real like in the spiritual journey, spiritual world is less and less, but some of us really want to be popular because it's such a need that has been created in like childhood storylines, like the need for friends. But it's actually not actually the need for friends that we need to like strive towards, because then you're creating the puppets that people like.
Mhm.
And the other idea is then to express yourself as an individual, because all of us are like worth just as much from each other. Like there's no difference on like there's only a level of can I like aim to be you? Is this the full expression of me as an individual? And whatever people think about that or don't think about it, like, it's totally fine. It's living in that full level of acceptance for yourself and for the people around you. So, kind of looking at the time. Oh, we're pretty. This was fun having such a conversation like this one. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah,
The
absolutely. Yeah.
difference comparison to the normal ones.
Yeah. Yep. And I think there's a lot of great value, like you said, nuggets all throughout that. But if you want to just take this time to kind of wrap up, bring everything to that conclusion and really review the importance of the brain dump, concept.
Yeah. So like overall, to the whole idea is you're not your body and you're not your mind. So the idea is to externalize your mind itself, your intellect, your logic into a place that you can observe, like as a placeholder. And then you can process that later on. But you being in that full state of flow, creation, like happiness experiences, like capture it somewhere else and then process it later on. And that will like free up your mind. Like, I'm actually becoming healthier as a result. Like I see people, I'm like, oh yeah, oh, you're stuck in your mind. Like you see that. And of course now with the whole mindful state is like, oh, just like meditate and relax and all of that stuff. But it's very, very difficult to actually do that. Like, what's meditation? Like, quiet your mind. How? If you got like 1,000 things stuck inside of your mind, then you're actually going crazy as a result. And this is why that mindful productivity is such an important one, because it's not about the fact of being productive, but it's like the connotation is mindful or mind empty.
Yeah.
Um, so that was a little bit introduction on the Braindump.
Yes. Yep. I think that was great.
Yeah. Maybe some questions pop up. I have no idea if someone asked something.
Nope.
No.
They were pretty quiet.
Nice. So yeah, my real idea is to help people to craft a personal management system. So currently I am going to do a workshop for 20 people to actually like create the workshop itself, to create a personal management system, to understand what the levels of depths actually go. And then, of course, this recording is the Braindump itself, is the starting point for that. All
All
right.
right.
Then thank you very much, Jason, again, also for your time and for all of the others. And then, yeah, next week, I don't know the time. Maybe we'll change the time just a little bit to make it more convenient. Like, what was the time that we discussed, Jason? Was that 1
1
hour
hour
later?
later. Yep.
1
1
hour
hour.
later. Okay. So that will be changed starting from next week. And as always, feel free to reach out. Yeah, I really want to thank everyone.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Layla.
Have a good one. Bye bye.